5th episode of Concussion Chats. My name is Taya. Concussion Chats is a podcast hosted by the McGill Students for the Concussion Legacy Foundation, with the help of Nick from the Concussion Talk podcast. We are dedicated to providing hope and strength to those suffering from concussions through sharing experiences. Today I have a recording of Sofia's talk to our support group. Sofia, a habit coach, is a content creator at retrainyourbrain.ca. In January 2008, at the age of 14, Ella suffered a hemorrhagic stroke due to an AVM rupture in her cerebellum. About 9 years after her recovery, through a long process of self-care and self-reflection, she realized that mental rehabilitation is just as, if not more important than physical. Ella received a Master's of Arts in Sociology from the University of Waterloo in 2018, and now she specializes in the mind's role in habit creation.
Thank you for that lovely introduction, Taya, and thank you for having me here today. Hi, everybody. My name is Ella. Nice to meet you all. So I guess I'm going to go into about 10 to 20 minutes of talk about a bit of my background. Today, I wanted to touch a little bit on how we view recovery and how our perspective of recovery can either hinder us or propel us forward. And I didn't realize there was different perspectives on recovery until about that 9-10 year mark after my stroke. So hopefully by me sharing this story today, if you guys are, a few years out, a couple months out from your concussions or your brain injuries, you can start the process a little bit earlier than I did. So start by giving a little bit of background about my brain injury. So as Taya mentioned, in January 2008, I had a hemorrhagic stroke. I was 14, just starting 9, and that hemorrhagic stroke was in my cerebellum, so just in that little bottom piece of your brain. And that was caused by an AVM rupture. So basically, what that is AVM stands for arteriovenous malformation. And essentially, when all these little blood vessels come together in your head, they're supposed to be connected via these tiny little blood vessels called capillaries. So they come together like this. And the purpose of the capillaries is to regulate the pressure of blood, essentially. And so in my head, the capillaries didn't form correctly, and nobody knew this. So I just continued life as usual. And one day, because the capillaries, or the blood flowing through the capillaries wasn't regulated, they kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger until one day they burst. And that was in January 2008. And so then my brain started absorbing the blood and I had a stroke as a result. I think it was technically 2, but like after you have 1 stroke, I just stopped counting. And so my repercussions after my stroke were probably very similar, or similar to some of the repercussions you guys might have had here after your concussions. So for me, because my stroke was cerebellar, that your cerebellum controls your coordination, specifically coordination of not just your physical movements, but also your thoughts and your emotions. So when it came to the physical, all the left-hand side of my body was damaged, or I had trouble using the left-hand side of my body. I didn't have any paralysis, or I was not hemiplegic, but I had a lot of trouble moving and using the left-hand side of my body. So I was in a walker. I was diagnosed with dysarthria, so I had a speech pathologist. As far as thoughts and emotion, a lot of short-term memory loss. I think a lot of you may have even experienced that after your concussion. Like for me, it was like Dory from Finding Nemo, where you don't even know that you forgot something. Quite humorous, I'm sure. And so because of these deficits, I basically felt like I lost my identity. So I lost past Ella. My identity specifically was an athlete. I was an avid soccer player and an academic. I didn't love school. I loved being smart and I excelled in school, and I always wanted to go to school afterwards to be a lawyer and a professional soccer player. And so obviously when this happened in grade 9, it kind of things took a turn for the worse, and I wasn't really able to achieve those ultimate goals. And I felt like I was essentially just a body and I have no identity. I felt like I was completely different person, and it actually ended up leading to a lot of negative thoughts. Mainly, I felt that if I didn't have my Ella-ness, then I felt like there was no point in living. And so I'm just going to take a little peek at my notes here. Right. So because I felt like I did lose that part of my identity, I figured, okay, I have to recover and get it back. Of course, doctor's orders were sending me to the physio and the speech pathologist, and they would always ask you, how much do you think you are recovered? How far along do you think you are? And I viewed recovery as a percentage. Maybe a lot of you have talked about recovery as a percentage with your doctors as well. And so eventually I started to look at recovery of myself as, I'm 99% recovered, but I'm never going to be 100% again. And at the time, I thought that was a really good thing. It's like 99%, like you're passing, like that's better than I did in school. And so at the time, I thought that was good, but I didn't realize that by telling myself I'm never going to be 100% again, I was actually bringing myself down. And my view of recovery was actually counterintuitive, because the more I focused on trying to become my past self again, I actually made it more difficult for me to adapt to my present self. And so I didn't realize, by saying I'm 99% recovered and I'm never going to be 100% again, I didn't realize that I was actually throwing out an opportunity for me to become 100% of my new self, my new Ella. And as I mentioned, a lot of negative thoughts started building up as a result of this, to the point where I just felt living was pointless. And that actually led to a suicide scare at the end of 2017. And that's when I finally realized that my life was actually never going to get better, in the sense that, these are things that I might have to live with for the rest of my life. But the only thing that can actually make my life better is the way I started to responding to my challenges. I needed to start responding to them so that I can actually start adapting. Um, so now when I have challenges, I see them in a few different ways. So first, I don't see anything as a deficit or a limitation anymore. People ask me a lot in just one-on-one conversations and podcasts and interviews, whatever it may be, like, what are your deficits post-stroke? Because it's been about almost 13 years for me now. And I believe I don't have any. That's not ignorance. I just don't see them as deficits or limitations. I see them as challenges I need to adapt to now, because the longer I view those things as deficits or limitations, I'm setting up limits for myself. I'm looking at myself as somebody who is disabled. Really, I just have to do things differently now. I find that that's a huge trend in the brain injury and stroke community online, is people viewing themselves as having a disability, when really, if you look at the word disability, it means not able, right? Disabled. And there are a lot of people who, sadly cannot use certain parts of their body. But when it comes to the brain, we all know neuroplasticity is, a saving grace. So although there might be a part of the brain that is damaged, because the brain can heal itself, and different parts of the brain can take over for damaged parts, I don't see that as a disability, right? It's just being differently abled, right? You have to heal. And so I think having that sort of mindset is going to propel you forward as you recover, so to speak. And then the second way I look at my challenges now in life is as they're forging me to become a stronger Ella. So whenever I have something negative happens to me, or I have an experience that makes me think, oh, if I didn't have a stroke, I would be able to do this. I think of it as if I'm a sword, and I honestly will close my eyes sometimes and I will picture a blacksmith holding a sword, and I'll picture that blacksmith dragging that sword across a whetstone to sharpen it. So if I'm a sword, every time I get dragged across that whetstone, I would be like, ow, that hurts. But now I'm so much sharper. And so that's how I see my life's challenges now. And that honestly helps me face more challenges in the future a lot better. And so I highly recommend you guys use that visual if you're ever faced with a challenge and you don't know how to move past it. So now I like to myself as an advocate for not necessarily always brain injury awareness, but I like to call it rock bottom awareness. Reason being because we've all felt the lowest we've ever felt, but for different reasons, right? I had a stroke, you guys all here had concussions, right? But yet we can find a lot of common ground. And I think that's really important. And so on my Instagram, on my blog, what I like to talk about and what I like to I'd like to give tactical advice. So not just like positive quotes and good reminders, which are obviously much needed. But for me, I found when I was going through my mental rehabilitation, I didn't have tactical advice. I didn't have things that I could use in the front lines. I didn't actually know how to put the really good reminders about, love your life and forge your new self. I didn't know how to put those things into action. So that's sort of the type of advice that I like to give to people now. And I'm all about turning your rock bottom into your breakthrough. That's what I say at the beginning of all my YouTube videos. That is my goal world, essentially. And I want to also define those terms for you guys. So I did mention rock bottom was, the lowest you've ever felt, and that's completely relative. Now, breakthrough, I don't want you to confuse it with a single moment. A breakthrough is not a single moment. If you can picture it, I actually do have a visual on my Instagram if you want to like scroll through and find it. But essentially, your breakthrough, in my opinion, is just getting to a point in your life where you can respond or recover quicker after challenges. So instead of if the path of your life doesn't go like this, right? So when you have your breakthrough, you might be down here, but then because you're at your breakthrough moment and you understand what sort of tactical things work for you, you can recover quicker. And then you're good. Maybe you plateau, maybe you go up, but then you go down again because that's what happens in life. But you're in your breakthrough, so you can recover quicker. So it's that quick recovery that I think is the focus. Not staying up here, it's always quick recovery. I got that idea about quick recovery actually when I was doing my master's degree at the University of Waterloo. I researched airport security and risk management. And as I was doing that, I realized that physical security was actually very similar to the security of the mind. So I figured, okay, if the focus on security is about quick recovery, then why shouldn't that be the focus in my life as well? And so that's when I started to make that transition. I think another thing that's important to talk about that's related to this, and this is maybe something that we can all talk about in the discussion, is after having a brain injury, I didn't feel like I was a better version of myself. And I have a lot of people say that to me as well, because there's some people you see online, they're like, I'm the 2.0 version of myself, it's old Ella died and the better Ella is here. And for me, I really never felt that way. And so it wasn't until I started viewing my recovery different that I could finally I could start creating that new Ella. And so it wasn't about being a better or worse version of myself. It was just about being a different version of myself. And again, that was what allowed myself to to propel me forward again and just take on new challenges and face adversity. So how long have I been talking for? Probably about 15 minutes.
Yeah, I've been going for 13.
13? Okay,
Yeah,
well,
pretty good.
All right, well, that's pretty much what I had in my notes. So I'd love to spend a lot of time in the talking and discussion with all of you guys. I wrote down a few questions and that would maybe take us in certain directions. One of the questions was really just an open-ended one to figure out what your takes on identity and recovery are in your life post-concussion.
Ella, could you repeat that? I'm going to type them in the chat.
Yeah, for sure. And also, got a little message. I can answer that. I'll repeat the question first. So I just wanted to know, what are your opinions on identity and recovery post brain injury?
Today I have Emily, who is also part of the McGill Students for Concussion Legacy Foundation, Nick from Concussion Talk podcast, and co-host Aaron of Concussion Talk podcast, who's the coordinator for the Newfoundland Labrador Brain Injury Association, joining today on Ella's awesome talk.
It was. I thought, well, I guess I'll get this party started.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I thought it was great. I thought she said it was 9 or 10 years before she worked around 10 years before she realized that she became philosophical and realizing that she, didn't feel like she didn't try to be her own, be more philosophical, I guess is my point, but she was not trying to be her old self again, trying to be who she is now.
Yeah, like the acceptance part.
Yeah, that's kind of I guess roughly my time frame. I guess it's just unfortunately one of those things that sounds like we both had. I don't know, both with different brain injuries and concussions. So I'm not sure that the difference in time would work there. But again, that severity is not linked to loss of consciousness or anything like that. So it's too many things. I mean, time frame is not necessarily set in stone, but
another thing we talked about with the group was also just the fact that, as a reminder, just that the people that come on and share for Thursday mornings, they're just sharing their experience, and everyone obviously has their different opinions and views on how we talk about things, and that was also a topic that we talked about, just in terms of, for Ella, really worked well for her to be really positive and see things positively and not as a disability. And then other people kind of relate more to that, endorse that label more. So we kind of also just talked about how everyone's got different opinions and different feelings for all those things, which was a really interesting discussion.
Yeah.
Go on there.
I was just thinking about the disability word too, how she liked to think of it. It was kind of not able was the meaning towards it, and she didn't like that, so she wanted to take on the ability part. It just reminded me of a client we had here as well, who even wrote a book, and it was this disability. So it was to focus more on the fact of things you still can do and not get dragged down with what you can't.
Yeah, and it's so tricky because right now I'm dealing with, I think Taya is as well, so we're dealing with the school office for students with disability. And it took me so long to finally be all right, this is a limitation that I have. And doesn't mean I'm defined by it, but I need to use their technology, right? And so it was kind of I took so long to finally be okay, I have to tell these people that this is this disability and this is this limitation and I need help. And then, I don't know, I got a little defensive with it.
Yeah.
But I get what she's saying too. It's like, I just need to adapt around it. But unfortunately, I kind of have to go through this, saying 5 million times to different people, it feels like, that I have a disability and limitation.
Yeah. Gotta, jump through a bunch of hoops to kind of, get the help you need once you kind of accept that, you do have disability. But then also, not seeing yourself as disabled is also important. So it's kind of like you have to pick your audience in a sense, it feels like, how you refer to yourself.
I think I was saying the same thing with that. So who you're talking to is say deaf disability. Well, if you're talking to someone who's unaffected by any of this, then they would say, well, I can't walk upstairs easily, I can't access this easily, I can't stare at a screen as long or whatever. Then that is a disability for them, but it's who you're talking to. It's not for you. It's just who you're talking to say that you have a disability or not, or you think you're doing great and you think you have different challenges. But that's if you say that, oh no, I don't have a disability, I just have more challenges I have to face up to, then that's not going to help them to help you. If they want to, if you're looking for some help from somebody, it's not going to help them to know that you think you can meet challenges. I'm sure you can, but I mean, they're asking for if they can help, and if they can help by helping up the stairs or improving your screen or something like that, then that's to them. It's not self-talk and talk that side is different.
Yeah, no, that's true. Kind of like the way you word it to other people, you get more help when you call it a disability.
Yeah.
You call it a limitation or a challenge. People don't take that seriously. But if you say the word disability, they legally have to, so all of a sudden they will. But apparently, it's really different. And yeah, you can talk to yourself in a certain way, but when it comes to legal things and school things, it's
I think the self-talk part was really important because she would always say differently abled, and that was a word that stuck out to me. And then when she described the visual technique she used too,
I really
the sword. Yeah, I thought that was really cool, and I was like, that's such an interesting visual way to try to make yourself feel more confident. So
when she said that, it's like, oh my god, that was, and it's so visual too, which visuals are great. I really liked that when she brought up the sword and how every challenge is just making you sharper and that was awesome.
That visualization didn't really help me a lot, but I appreciate what you were saying for sure. I like what you were saying, this visualization helps it, and then go for it. But for me, it wasn't. I mean, it's just different attitudes towards it, and for me, it didn't really relate to me as well. But
it's kind of take what you get from things and find things that help you, and if it didn't have a significant thing for you, then meh.
Yeah.
I forgot what I was thinking again.
That's okay. We're all concussed people. It's fine.
I'm not using my headset for the first time today, so I'm not sure. Hopefully this recording is all going to work out well, because it could just be a mess.
I can hear you fine. I think you're probably good.
Bad we don't want to do it again.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Do you want to talk now?
Yeah. I can't remember what I was thinking of.
Another
inspiration.
Okay. She also later on talked about how, growing up, when she was younger, they didn't call it a brain injury or anything. They just referred to it as a brain aneurysm because people would know what that is. And she kind of also talked about how in a sense it was good, but then also it wasn't, because just like realizing that all these things could have been related to that, but then she also just never kind of put those restrictions on herself, and like went into things being like, oh, I can't do that because I have a brain injury. So that was also really interesting for her to talk about, like how she kind of dealt with finding out that it wasn't just a brain injury. Well, not just a brain injury, but you know what I mean. Like it was a brain injury, and it was different than what she had grown up knowing. And do you remember?
Yeah. Well, I'll go on that first, but I do remember now.
I think you raised your hand.
I think that a lot of us can, not a lot of us, I shouldn't say that, but I can kind of relate to that as well, just because it's, like, for, like, years, I was like, yeah, I'm pretty much as good as I'm going to get from my concussion, and then, like, every now and then I find out something that was like, hey, that was totally brain injury related, and it's kind of like, oh. It always feels kind of heavy, but it also, like, is nice that it wasn't, like, filling up my head all the time, you know? Like, it wasn't always a stressor, because now I am at the point to where, like, I'm adapting and I'm working with it, and I think that it's just, that balance is so important. Like, that acknowledgement without obsessing. It's so different, but so important. But it's, like, nice to know what's going on, right? So that way I can ask for help.
It's kind of like good and bad with like the internet age where like you have access to all this information, but you should not use it all. Like you don't need to look at every single article ever about your concussion, but you do need to like work on yourself more so.
Yeah. It's like I can obsess about every single thing that I'm doing. That's whether it's helping me or making it worse.
Yeah.
But then I just like would never be present. But and I found that, like, I'll just, like, at least, like, I was telling parents the other day, I was watching a TV show with my sister that I hadn't seen in a few years, and I remembered the names of 2 characters, and I was like, and it's such a cool thing, but, like, and I wasn't really looking for it, like, it just happened, and I was like, oh, man, that's new. I just felt like I remember something. But it's like, if I'd been obsessed, like, I don't know. Might have missed it, you know?
Yeah.
But what I was going to say earlier is somebody brought up in the group, he asked her, I have it in my notes, did you, hang on, it's pulling up. I took one. He asked Ella if she had considered herself to have recovered or to have redeveloped. Or both.
Oh, yeah, I liked that question.
Yeah, and she was like, she said she'd never heard the term redeveloped before, but she liked it. I really like that too.
I really liked that.
So, yeah, you're redeveloping. You kind of push back, right? As a person, but then you get to redevelop yourself in new, different ways. And it's kind of positive and exciting.
Yeah.
I thought it was, like, she was so young when this happened too, like only 14. And I was just kind of like, I wonder if she grieved the loss of an identity she had before. Because I mean, when you're 12, 13, I don't miss when I was that age. But maybe she just kind of grieved the loss of who she could have become in a way. And it was really interesting. It's like, maybe you never had that chance to develop what you thought you were going to be like. You thought you were going to be a lawyer and all that. But like, this was your chance to redevelop into who you are now, and you're a motivating, strong person, and that's amazing in itself.
Yeah. So my injury happened when I was 14, and it was a combination. It still is a combination of grieving. At the time, I didn't really take the time to grieve like I needed to, because I didn't really, you're 14, how are you supposed to know that you're grieving yourself?
Yeah.
Like, what a concept. But I totally was grieving, like, soccer, and not being able to read, and like my general personality, like, because I felt so much more awkward, like we were talking about the other week, and I just didn't feel like I functioned the same in the world. I felt like inherently different than everyone else, which is honestly kind of how I've always a little bit felt, but it was very, very exacerbated after the injury. But then there's also, like, as I've gotten older, there has been this, like, so I look back on high school and, like, like 14 to 18 years old, we're so dysfunctional. Like, I didn't really, I don't even know what I did, to be honest. And I kind of grieve that. I grieve, like, not having to have had that same experience as other kids. Granted, everyone says they hate high school, except for some people seem to have really loved it. But I just, like, I wish I'd hated it for the, sometimes it's like I grieve.
Just to be like everyone else, just to,
I like hate it.
Like just from like what we learned about her from talking, like it sounds like her family, her support, like her people helping her through her rehab, like she didn't really talk about like friends and growing up and stuff, but other than that, like I feel like she seemed like she maintained a pretty like normal life-ish to an extent. Like she was talking about how like she plays soccer now, and she wears like a little protective headgear thing, but like that was just like normal. She whatever, it's no big deal. I don't know, she just normalized a lot of things, which seemed really cool to be surrounded by all that.
She also talked about like the recharge time getting shorter, and that's how she knew she was getting better, those breakthrough moments.
Yeah, that was a good one too.
Yeah, and I really relate to that, especially as like just like the mental health aspect, not even just like the physical health aspect, but the like spinning out because of something, but then like being able to recover from that faster.
Yeah, like not even like being symptom free or something. It's more like, can I do such and such and recover in such and such amount of time? That was really cool.
How much faster can I bounce back?
Yeah.
I think it's
How much time does it take when you go into your CPAP battery to recharge? Like that type of thing.
Yeah. That's what I was talking about with my concussion doctor. She gave me the light things. I'm looking at the lights that are different frequencies to stabilize my heartbeat, the syntonics thing. I can't remember if I talked about that last week, but she said a big thing that she hears is people recharge faster after all those symptoms get tripped. And she's like, that's kind of the goal. Like, I'm not saying that you're not going to be exhausted faster than, your non-brain injury person, but can we get you back on your feet faster? That's a really nice way to think about it too, because then it just feels more attainable, which I think is what she was talking about, like shifting our perspectives.
Yeah.
The percentage thing is, if I set my goal to a realistic, attainable goal, which is just maybe I can recharge in a day versus 2 days at some point in time.
And I also like the whole, she wasn't like super focused on being symptom free, which I think is a big thing. Like everyone just wants to be symptom free. But her recharging faster thing, is definitely a better way of looking at it, because you can't really fixate on it as much. You can't, I take that back. You could fixate on it as you want, really want to fixate on it, but it's just a better way of thinking. You're not obsessing over getting rid of the symptoms. It's more the recovery period that's important.
That's kind of what I think, that's like it's a lot of like perspective. I know for me, when I was with my recovery, it wasn't like symptoms, like they'd say, does this hurt, does this hurt, or can you see this, or I knew I had certain issues, but I never considered them, or thought they were symptoms. And when you start saying, I want to be symptom free, you start counting all your symptoms. Okay, I don't have that anymore, I don't have this anymore, I don't have this anymore. But then you obviously have to fix down them to do it, to know they're gone. And if you stop thinking of them like as symptoms, as more just parts of your life that are just, there, then it'll be easier. It's like, wait, this is not much of an issue, but like my double vision is not as much of an issue as it was. But it doesn't mean double vision is a symptom, but it's not going to go away anytime I probably saw that forever. And I mean, the same my walking and my balance and stuff. So, but I mean, Just
It's-
again, just a perspective, I think.
Yeah, no, definitely, and perspective is really important. And I think it's also just kind of accepting, like it's not, you're not fully accepting this, but you're not like actively fighting your symptoms because like we talked about before, like when you resist, they persist. Like you're not trying to like act like they're not there. You're not trying to make them go away. You're more just focused on, like Nick said, like things being better overall.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was kind of how she defined breakthrough too. Like it's many moments, not just one.
Yeah.
And it kind of reminded me of this image that I'd seen, probably other people have seen it because it's just online, but it was like a ladder going up into the clouds kind of thing. And it's like one really giant step all after the other, and the person's like can barely reach it. But then the other ladders, these little tiny ones, and the person's way further up. And it's like the more you visualize smaller steps, the further you're going to get.
Yeah, that's really good.
Yeah, but I saw that image, I was like, wow. Like,
Yeah,
that actually impacted.
Wow.
Yeah.
I think sometimes the whole like okay, you're just like unsure what to say because of the word acceptance. And I think what happens is sometimes people think that when they accept these challenges that they have to face, then they're like giving up or something.
Which it's not, really. If anything, you're doing the opposite.
Yeah. It's accepting so that you can problem solve. Because you
Accepting
can't,
that
we
there
live
are-
in this world of delusion. I talk about my world of pretend that I like to go into, because then it doesn't feel like I have to give anything up. But it's not giving up, it's just, it's working around it.
Yeah, it's just
Adapting.
accepting that there are challenges, not
Yeah.
that they're not defeatable, but that there are challenges.
Yeah, accepting that there are challenges, there are difficulties, but you're not accepting it as like your end point. Like
Exactly.
you're just accepting that that's what you need to deal with right now, and like that's how it is.
Yeah.
And it's interesting too, like from a really nerdy biology perspective, adaptation is what makes like lineages go longer.
Yeah.
So it's honestly the best trait that you want to have, because that's what propels you forward and keeps things moving in the Darwin survival kind of way.
I was just thinking about how I don't think I've ever had a doctor, or maybe back then I didn't. I can't remember about right now. But I've never really had a doctor be like, hey, like, you might never be symptomatic free. Like, I've never really had a doctor sit down and kind of be like, let's break this down into little goals of recovery. And I think that's interesting because, you know, when you go to a doctor, like, we're told from a young age, like, you go to the doctor and they fix you and you get
Yeah.
And, like, I think we still go into that with concussions and we're like, they're going to fix me and I'm going to be good. And, like, and they kind of just, like, it's not that they're saying that we're going to be symptomatic free, but they're also not saying that, you know, maybe we just got to focus on little goals. It's just, it's not really talked about. And I think it would be interesting. It took me, like, I had to figure out on my own, like what Ella was saying, that I'm not going to be how I was before. Like, I had to kind of figure that all out myself, that I had to accept that this is the best it's going to get. But I always kind of felt like, I mean, maybe I wasn't doing good enough because I'm not better all the way. And I think it would be interesting if doctors kind of took that time to be like, you know, maybe we won't get your vision back 100% to where it was, but let's just try and shoot for 70%. You know?
Even just like what your concussion doctor was saying about like your light stuff, like how it's not like she's not saying it's going to cure and fix everything. It's just that it's going to be a quicker bounce back.
This reminds me so much of the physical versus mental health, like healthcare systems. Because like in physical health, oftentimes it's like, oh, you broke your leg, put it in a cast, we'll fix it, physiotherapy, you're good to go. Probably back to where you were at before. But then mental health, it's like, no, you got to do these small steps, and it might improve your mood. And it almost sounds like, because the physical changes, they try to fix them and things aren't really improving because a lot of the symptoms are coming from your mind as well. And depression, anxiety are all likely to increase after a brain injury. That is like the doctors really have to actually focus on that part where it's small steps first.
Yeah, and my doctor said, we're just trying to get me out of my sympathetic system, my fight or flight. Like, we can't feel stuff until I get out of that, and it does need that anxiety and that like fight or flight mode like does need to like chill out so we can figure out what is like just visual symptom.
Yeah. It's all just such a big emphasis on how the two have to combine. Yeah.
I think they do a similar thing with like chronic pain as well sometimes. Like you finally hear about pain management one day, and it's like, but they still aren't always like, you're still going to be in pain to a little extent, you know?
Yeah.
No, that's really true. Interesting. All right. Well, thanks to, or did anyone have anything to add before we wrap up? All right.
Enjoy your talk.
So thanks again to Ella for her awesome talk. You guys can find her on Instagram. I think her Instagram is Retain Your Brain. If not, you can find her website, which is Retain Your Brain.
Can you repeat that? Retrain your brain?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks to Nick for helping us do this podcast. We'll have a new podcast posted Monday mornings. Upcoming podcasts can be found on concussiontalk.com, Spotify, YouTube, and Apple Podcasts. You can find more information about our group on concussionmtl.com. Our peer-to-peer support group is free and open to everyone, and we hold 3 weekly meetings on Zoom, which will also be linked in the description. Thanks for joining me today, guys. HeadCheck Health bridges gaps in concussion care through simple, powerful technology. Join organizations like the Canadian Football League, Trek Factory Racing, the Canadian Junior Hockey League, Eastern Washington University, and Volleyball Canada, who rely on HeadCheck to improve communication and optimize care. Visit headcheckhealth.com for more. The music at the beginning of this podcast is by Ben Sound. www.bensound.com.